Welcome to the Growth Whisperers Podcast, where everything we talk about is building enduring great companies, or ideas to help you and others build enduring great companies, because that's what Brad and I are passionate about. That's what we spend our days doing, and that's what we take a lot of pride in being a part of. I'm Kevin Lawrence. I'm here today, as always, with Brad Giles, my wonderful partner down in Australia. Brad, how's it going?
Excellent. Lovely today. Thank you. Lovely. It's warming up for summer, and that's a nice place to be.
Nice. Well, I'm warming up for summer-ish because I'm down in Palm Springs, California for this recording of this episode. Even though it's cold for them, it's warm for us compared to what it's like up in Canada. So let's jump right in, Brad. What's your word of the day?
Big, hairy, audacious goal. So don't be afraid to go big. The reason being, I had a client, and about 5-ish years ago, we set a goal, and it was certainly audacious, and it met all of the criteria. And then I would say in the last 2 weeks, they made a very large acquisition, and this means that they're going to achieve their BHAG. And so the CEO emailed me and said, we're going to hit our BHAG 5 years early. So we're delighted. What about yours, Kev?
Mine is everyone has a story. And over the weekend, got to know some, sort of extended family of someone I know, and having the time to sit and ask questions and hear people's life stories, what they've been through, what they've experienced, what they did for their work, their unique insights into the world. So everyone's got a story if you've got time to sit and with them and the desire to hear it. And it's just fascinating. I just love hearing people's stories and experiences. So
that's good.
Yeah. So everyone's got a story, and hopefully everyone's got a big, hairy, audacious goal too.
Yeah. That's good.
It's kind of a weak bridge, but it's a bridge of sorts. Let's jump. So for today's show, what the heck are we going to talk about? Do we have something to talk about today?
Oh, yes, we do. Yes, we do indeed. The hidden cost of not having a team of all A players. So maybe I'll start by just saying how this came about.
Yeah.
One of the teams that I work with were approached about a potential acquisition. And we had a discussion about the quality of the leadership team, because the quality of the potential acquisitor was second to none. They were absolutely impressive, and the person who is my client, who I work with, they had a look around the room and they were, in a very different league, let's just say. And so we had a bit of a frank conversation about the quality of the leadership team and the impact that is having on them. The impact is serious. And what is their BHAG? And are they trying to achieve it? And are they going to be able to achieve it with the people that they've got now that they've experienced being in the room with a team of A players?
Yeah. And it's interesting. I am in Palm Springs, and as of tomorrow morning, I'll be meeting with one of my clients from the US. And they have a team of almost all A players, and the whole organization, and they're a solid, organization, more than 500 employees. And I'll find out tomorrow the current stats, but last we checked, it was over 60% of the whole organization was A players. And the results they're getting, even through COVID, are astonishing, spectacular. And again, most organizations have, based on the measures we used, about 25 to 30% maximum A players. Because most organizations are, they care about performance, but they have a lot of people who just aren't outstanding. And so, what we're going to dig into today is this thing of, understanding clearly what A player is, which we'll define a bit further in a moment. But what is the cost if your team isn't all A players? And we're talking about your direct team. So, for example, in this organization I'm with, this CEO that I'm going to be meeting with the team, his direct team is all A players.
Yeah.
And almost all of the people in that next layer are. But the whole organization is, again, well north of 60% of all the 500 plus people. So let's define the difference between an A and by the way, this is something, I know Brad, yourself and myself, I spend a lot of time on this with all of the companies we work with, because it's really about getting amazing people into those key roles or those important jobs.
Yeah.
And obviously anyone that reports to the CEO or is one layer away from the CEO is a pretty darn critical, no matter what, is going to be a critical role.
Yeah, so the word A player gets bandied around a bit, but really simply, we use the method of top grading, and we would advocate, imagine a simple 2x2 matrix. And on that simple 2x2 matrix, on the one hand, on the vertical axis, you've got core values, and on the horizontal axis, you've got productivity or performance in the role. And then in the top right corner, you have A players. So then the people, as you move left to the top left corner, you would have a B player. So
that's
they
someone who fits the culture and core values.
Yes,
but the results are iffy. They're not consistent, and they're pretty good to good. Yeah, just not great.
Yeah. So I want to hang out with them. They're fun to chat to.
Yep.
They're good, but they don't necessarily always produce the results that the company needs relative to their role. Their product, they don't really, their productivity isn't as good as it could be. They're less than 50%, let's say. Then below them, we've got what we call the C players. So they are low on culture and core values, and equally, they're low on productivity. And then obviously to the right of that, we've got what we would call, what some people would call BCs, but we would call toxic As.
Yeah, and those toxic A's are people who get excellent results. They get outstanding results consistently. They're just a nightmare for everyone they have to work with, or a lot of people they have to work with. They create a lot of drama, and they create a lot of friction in the business. They're often the hardest people to remove because they are so darn productive and very good at what they do. Unfortunately, it just comes with a big price for the organization. So when we're saying those A players in the top right, they're at least an 85 to 90% fit. Brad, you all good there? You had a very expressive face. For those of you that aren't watching the video, Brad's face just opened up like a kid on Christmas morning. It was awesome.
Yeah. I'm sure that Brendan, our audio producer, will thank me for that.
Yeah. So there was, in terms of A players, we're looking for someone that's an A student. In Canada, it starts at 85%. I believe in the US, it's 90. But it's at 85% or better fit on culture, ideally 90 again. And in terms of performance, they're in that top 10% of all of the performers. And they consistently deliver excellent results, and they are a delight to work with. You've got someone as an A player on your team when you're so excited to work with them. You feel honored that they're on your team, and you would hate the thought of losing them. Not just because you have to replace them, but because they're so darn good at their job. So that's the A player. Again, toxic A player is someone that is darn good at their job. They just drive you crazy, or other people crazy in the org.
So within A players, there's actually 4 different types that we're going to talk about next week. But this week, we're talking about the cost. And again, born of this stark realization for this team that I work with when they actually saw what it's like to be surrounded by A players. So what are the costs? What are the costs that we've got? Well, first of all, if you aren't surrounded by A players in your team, it creates more work for you.
Yes.
More work. They are unable to take on tasks. They're unable to confidently execute tasks, and you can't really push them to the next layer. You can't really push them to execute the things that the company so desperately needs, or the team desperately needs, because you just don't have that confidence. You know that they're not going to be able to do it, or they're going to create mayhem, perhaps.
Right. So said another way is you have to manage down. You have to be more involved than you would ideally like to, because you can't trust that the job is going to get done as expected. Whether it's that if it's a toxic A, that they're going to frustrate people and you have to stay involved to manage the conflict or the drama, or for the B, that they're going to get it done on time or on quality or on budget or on whatever it happens to be. Somehow you need to, basically, it's like a little bit of babysitting. You got to be involved like it's a 7-year-old child versus if it's a 28-year-old child or 27-year-old child, right?
Yeah.
Very different amount of time and energy, and it sucks up a lot. And some people, interestingly, they're so used to being involved. Sometimes they might be micromanagers themselves, but somehow they're so used to being involved, they don't even notice it. Yeah. And when they work with an A player, they're shocked because there's actually not a lot to do with an A player at all, just a little bit of guidance.
And that's fascinating that you say that, because for this particular client that I'm talking about, one of the biggest problems they've got is they are just having to take everything on. And one of the reasons they were willing to talk about acquisition was that they couldn't imagine a future where they wouldn't have to take all of the responsibility.
When we talk to entrepreneurs and they're fed up and frustrated and wanting to sell their business, most of the time, it's because their team is driving them crazy. Yeah. Because they don't have a team that is 100% A players, for sure. And sometimes the team below their team is not weak enough, and it drives them crazy because too much junk comes up to them. Too much, they get involved in way too much. So look at it, basically, not having a team of all A's, it's going to take a lot more energy than doing your real CEO job. And by the way, how do you know if this is true? You're focused a lot on short-term, day-to-day stuff. Yeah. Now, little caveat here, it could be you and your own bad habits of how you're leading. It could be. It might not just be the team. So when we start with companies, we try to unpack that. We try to unpack, could it be that the CEO is involved too much or the leader's involved too much? And the team maybe has more capability, or is it, the team effectiveness? And the answer often is usually a little bit of both.
And you can, there's a very good chance that you can work through those habits. Like, this is not something that's often insurmountable if one is coachable, but you can overcome that this is a solvable problem, is my point.
It is, yeah. So that's point number one. It makes notably more work for you. And again, you can take that concept of it's like having a 7-year-old child or a 27-year-old child. They both take different amounts of energy, notably different. Second one is less achievement for the company, because A players use less resources to get the job done, period. They're creative and they find ways to efficiently get things done. Where others, whether it's toxic A, creates a drain on your organization other ways, or a B or a C, they just, it's like they get less results per pound, right? Less results per dollar. So your organization can't achieve it because the team actually isn't as strong. And remember, A player is the top 10% of talent available at the salary you are paying. It's not that they cost more. You've got so-and-so here that's making, $85,000 a year, who's a B, and you got so-and-so here that's making $85,000 a year, who's an A. Same compensation, but the A, and I'm doing a visual on screen and holding my hands up, but the A gets notably better results per dollar or results per pound, whatever you want to look at it. And it's never mind the work you have to do, just the net impact or value added into the company is notably different.
The visual representation was good, but the words did it justice. There was nothing that you missed. Okay. So imagine that you are at an offsite annual or quarterly workshop, and what you're doing is setting the priorities and the strategy for the coming 90 days or year. And you look around and you just can't give any big projects to the people who are on the team. Mm-hmm. You can't, let's say that you're going to implement a new CRM or a new accounting package, or you're going to start in a new geography or something that's quite chunky. Well, if you look around the team and you can't readily hand over big projects to them with absolute confidence, there'll be only a little bit of guidance on your part, then, this is how it translates into less achievement for the company. Because if everyone can't take on a big project, if most people can't take on a big project and confidently execute it, overall, the aggregate is that you take on less big projects.
Yes. Or it takes a lot longer to do the ones that you have. So I'll give you an example. One of the companies that I was working with, this goes back last year. And I'll genericize the story to protect the nice people that we work with.
Awesome.
But there was one executive in a company who wasn't an A player by any stretch of, would have been a low B player.
Yeah.
Like a low performing B. And that was, yeah. And so generally for them, when there was a project the company was working on and that they were in charge of it, well, they weren't highly effective. They weren't a highly effective human being. And they weren't an expert at the project that they were driving. So as a result, the project took way longer, took way more human time than it should, because it's almost like, it's like getting a 3-year-old to go and paint your house.
Yeah.
They're going to use more paint and take more time, and then you're going to have to still fix it anyways. And that's what this was like. And again, not for lack of desire, just they didn't have capability. And it was so cumbersome and complicated, and the output was okay. It needed a bit of cleanup, but it wasn't great. But for the amount of energy it consumed, it was almost a crime, because they didn't know what they were doing, and they just made 3-year-old paint in your house. Yeah, that's what it was like. That's what happens, and as a result, it slows down the whole organization, and it makes it harder. And it's just because you just burn more resources to get the same thing. I like that metaphor. 3-year-old paint in your house. That's what's going on.
So yeah, you're going to achieve less as a company. So let's move on to the next one. There's more stress for the whole team. There's more stress. Why? Because a team of A players who are aligned and heading in the same direction, there's very little points of friction. But when you've got B players who aren't as productive, C players who both aren't as productive and don't align with the values, and toxic A's who don't align with the values, and those people are all doing their different kind of thing, all of those little points of misunderstanding, they compound and they add up, and that creates more stress for the team. So even if you've got one C player, I've seen a team with one C player that was just cataclysmic. Like, yeah, it was just terrible. Nobody wanted to talk to this person or sit next to them, and they would avoid them actively. And this is a leadership team of a, $30 million business. And no one wanted to talk to this individual. No one wanted to go near them for, let's just say, several years.
We had one in a company that I worked with where there was, we'll call it a very low B, probably a C player.
Yeah.
And I remember one of the other, it was the executive and some of the senior leaders. So like 15 people in a room. One of the executive was so frustrated with this person. He's like, you know what we're going to do? We're going to put you up there, and we're going to put you up there in a hot air balloon. And then we're going to shoot you down.
It's a bit harsh.
It was a bit hard, but some of this guy was such a misfit in the company. It was incredible. And the whole team was just had enough of it. And so the best, metaphor to think about this is, it's like in a relay race, right? If you're doing a relay race and you've got one person that can barely run and definitely cannot pass the baton to somebody else, that creates a lot of stress for the team, because it screws up the whole team. And you've got these people who, they might not be the fastest in the world, but they can run decently and they can pass the damn baton. But this person can't do that.
Yeah.
And as a result, they get frustrated because they don't win. They get frustrated at the other person. And it's obviously bad for the person that's the weak player on the team, because they don't feel good about not being able to, grab the baton or hand the baton off properly. And so the whole team pays a price for that. And it's even worse if you have a toxic A. That's just assuming a B player who's trying to do the right things in that relay race example. But if you've got a toxic A, they just bring in all kinds of other junk. I mean, and by the way, you've got a toxic A when people threaten to or talk about or actually quit because of them.
Yeah.
Because they are just such a nightmare and a force to be reckoned with. And if they've stayed for a long time, they generally have some sort of power or relationship with the CEO or the right thing that is to be able to stay there. Because if they were, that kind of bad behavior, so usually there's some other quirky dynamic or weird dynamic that has that person being able to keep their role as well.
But here's the thing. If you're listening to this and you have identified perhaps in your team someone who isn't an A player of whatever flavor, your inaction is preventing them going to be an A player at another organization. Mm-hmm. So most of the time, it's the fit that is the problem. And this person can go to find another job where they'll be really happy, because most of the time C players or toxic A's aren't happy, where they'll be really happy, they'll be a really good fit, and they will be an A player in that organization. It's just that this individual can't be an A player in your organization. So
for whatever reason, yes.
Yeah. So it's good to know that.
And the other piece on that, there's something else that came into my mind, Brad, as you're talking about that. Oh, yeah. And if you keep a B player or even worse, a toxic A player on the team, you are endorsing them.
Yes.
And your culture is not what you say it is. The culture is demonstrated through your actions. So if you got a toxic jerk on your team and you let them stay there, being a toxic jerk is actually okay. Actually, the CEO subconsciously, it's seen like the CEO is okay with it or endorses it.
Well, people say, why is this person not taking action?
Correct.
Why? So in actual fact, the toxic A may be performing terribly. No one may want to talk to them, but it actually impacts the leadership much, much worse, because it's the inaction about that undermines the leader and actually can be so much more detrimental for the leaders because of their inaction. So, we could do a whole episode on this. So
basically, number one, more work for you. Number two, less achievement for the company. Number three, more stress for the whole darn team. And now number four, when you don't have A players, you got to fix a lot more mistakes. A players get the job done right. So you're going to have more mistakes to fix. Now, whether it's relational issues, service issues, quality issues, and it's not that A players don't make mistakes, but when they do, they generally fix them themselves quite quickly. You don't have to get involved fixing those. And I've seen with a couple of toxic A's, like toxic jerks, and often some of these toxic A's are very aggressive, and sometimes it's because they're trying to hide stuff. And I've seen a number of people who were ripping the company off. Yeah. I remember I had this one guy, and he was the one guy, I remember it was, I won't name the country, but I remember having a meeting with him, and he was being so rude to some of the people and aggressive. And I just came up to him and I got in his face and said, hey, we don't do that here. Now, the CEO wasn't in the meeting. I was running the meeting on the CEO's behalf. The CEO wasn't there. And I'm like, we don't do that there. And all I know is I started to watch his hands because I thought he might take a swing at me. And although I was ready, I was just gonna, if he hit me, it would have been a bad scene. But thankfully that didn't happen. But the point of it is we found out, and I was on this guy because he was arrogant. He was all kinds of things the company wasn't. In the end, we found out that he was embezzling or doing some funky transactions in a way that millions of dollars went a direction that they shouldn't have. Mm-hmm. And, it's not shocking. I'm not saying A players are crooks. I'm just saying that sometimes there's these people that are up to all kinds of weird stuff, and nice people can do it too. So I'm not saying it's always the case. But the point of it is that there's a lot of mistakes and messes from either their relationship issues, if they're toxic, or their incompetence, or their mediocrity.
Well, it's quite possible that what you're seeing as a leader in the team is the top of the iceberg, that under the surface, there's a lot more mistakes and problems that you're just not aware of because of a whole range of reasons. So yeah, there are definitely more mistakes, and ultimately they're coming back to you in some form or another to sort out. So that's definitely a cost. But then we've got a bonus one. There's a bonus. So if this is our 4, okay, more work for you, less achievement for the company, more stress for the whole team, and then more mistakes for you to resolve. But then the bonus is that if you've got Bs in your team or even Cs, and if they've got anything to do with hiring, Bs hire low Bs and Cs, right? So you're not going to have a B player on the team who's going to hire an A player. So your maintenance, you're maintaining a team that has people who aren't A players actually compounds downward in a negative loop. Like the more Bs you get, the more low Bs and Cs you get. And it just continues to spiral downwards.
Yeah,
and
weak
so
people, generally weak, not so good people generally hire weak, not so good people who generally hire weak, not so good, right?
Yeah.
It takes a confident person to hire someone more capable than them.
Yep.
And a lot of these B players are smart. They know that they're not performing at a spectacular level. And so many of them are intimidated by people who would be, because it'll make them look bad. And I don't blame them for that. There's an element of self-preservation that people have, and that's understandable.
But if you drop an A player into a team of Bs and Cs, there's 2 things that's going to happen. They're either going to drop down to the level of the Bs and Cs, or they're going to be out of there quickly because they're going to look around and say, I'm not at the same caliber of these people.
Right.
I'm at a different level. I'm out of here. Like, I want to be on a winning team.
Or they're going to come and tell you this is not good, and they're going to be frustrated with their teammates. And if you don't fix it, then they probably at some point have no choice but to leave.
Yeah.
High performers want to work with high performers. So yeah, to summarize that up, is that there's lower B performers or B performers hire people like them or less. They don't generally hire people better. And if someone is performing at a 78% level, they're less likely to hire someone who's going to perform at 110% level.
Yeah.
And there's always exceptions. So let's kind of summarize these. So number 1 is, the top 5 reasons why you got to have a team full of A players, because if not, it creates more work for you. There will be less results or achievement for the company because resources are getting wasted and squandered. It just takes more energy to get stuff done. More stress for the whole team because they're on a team with people who aren't all really strong at their roles. More mistakes for you to resolve. And then the kicker, the bonus one, and I love that one, is that those B players tend to hire lower Bs or Cs. And even if they want to, subconsciously, they're less likely to be hiring A's.
And that's a cost that you might not have factored in to your inaction around people who aren't performing. Awesome. What a good chat. Something that, certainly we're passionate about because we've seen it played out so many times over time. So interesting quick point. This was about the hidden cost of not having a team of A players. And then next week, we're going to be talking about the 4 different types of A players. So be sure to look out for that episode 89 next week. And as another quick note, Kevin and I both produce a newsletter each week. So you can go to our websites to subscribe for that. And there's various updates and blogs and stuff that's in there. So Kevin, you can find at lawrenceandco.com, and myself, you can find at evolutionpartners.com.au. Good chat today, Kev. And thanks for listening, everyone. This has been the Growth Whisperers podcast. I'm Kevin, and Kevin is my partner in crime here. For the video version, you can go to YouTube as well and find us talking on there. So good to chat. Do have yourselves a great week. Look forward to chatting to you again next week.